Task Force Ayungin is what we're here to talk about tonight. There's a lot of questions around this at the moment, a lot of confusion, precisely because we're only finding out about this now. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin in a tweet, and nobody knows at this point whether that was intentional or not. Let slip, and that's why we use that verb, let slip, that there is such a thing as Task Force Ayungin. I know they've explained it away by saying it's just technical assistance via information sharing, but wasn't that already happening before? And why do you need a task force for that? What do you make of it?
With just a few months before a second Donald Trump presidency and a very interesting cabinet coming together, which we can discuss separately, everyone's talking about Trump-proofing. But this is, I think, more 6 months ago. What we're seeing right now is what I call pre-Trumping, right?
Okay.
You're kind of trying to out-Trump Trump, right? So we already see that in Ukraine, where the United States, in the 11th hour is clearing Ukraine to use NATO, including American missile systems against Russia, right? We already saw the update just a while ago about even allowing the Ukrainians to use anti-personnel mines. Right, so you're seeing here that the Biden administration, because they have nothing to lose anymore, is to go all in on different conflicts. Now that brings us to the second Thomas Ayungin issue. Now, obviously, the United States has made it clear that the Mutual Defense Treaty applies to any of our public vessels, aircrafts, and yung mga sundalo natin.
Right.
So our military personnel. And that's what makes Ayungin Shoal extremely important because we literally have a military base there atop BRP Sierra Madre. So it would be impossible to think the Americans would not be involved in the situation there, especially after the escalation we saw earlier this year and some of our folks even losing their finger and almost getting injured. So this is a confirmation of, I think, what has been there for quite some time. The only question here is the Biden administration laying down the ground for more direct American involvement?
That's right.
Or they're just trying to preempt that and say, hey, if ever, before Trump takes credit for anything big or important there, we have already been laying this down. So I think it's more about, I call it pre-Trumping, right, maneuver. But we're totally not surprised. Now, just to be clear, it is different for the U.S. to have like shadowing vessels or drones while we're doing patrols than something which is more like intelligence sharing and coordination and what you can call offshore. Like, we're just here, just in case you also need us to come, we'll come. That's different from, oh, let's go there together. So I think there are levels of coordination. We're not level like 5 or 6 yet. We're still at level 1 or 2. But eventually we may go there.
That's what I was trying to ask. Like, do you think one of these days that could very much happen, that they could also be joining us in the resupply missions? We've denied their help. They've been offering help, but the Philippines says we can still manage.
We could still manage back in the day, and probably in theory we can still manage, but the reality is that the preponderance of force of China is a reality we have to deal with. And I think everyone is expecting under the second Donald Trump presidency, there'll be many colorful things we can talk about forever. But on the foreign policy front, if you look at Mike Waltz, you look at Marco Rubio, Senator Rubio has been a very good friend of the Philippines. He had an op-ed piece last year saying there's no way the U.S. can maintain its great power status if it loses key allies like the Philippines and access to important resources here. So I think everyone is expecting that there'll be more all-in. I don't know about Trump himself, but his team in terms of helping frontline allies like the Philippines. And China will be important. Just the other day, for the first time in a long time, America no longer has any aircraft carrier in the Middle East. They're taking them out and they're putting everything here. So we're now very much at the front line. So yes, if China responds to that growing American presence focus with also growing muscle flexing, we might go to the next level. So I think when people look at the West Philippine Sea, they think this is it, this is the fight. But this is a 12-round, I always say, boxing match, and we're still in the early rounds here. And things can take many permutations, including how much Americans will be involved, right? So I think we're still in the preliminary phases. And for me, after 6 years of Duterte, after decades of not building our capabilities and focusing internally, we're now in this very learning curve mode, right? And in this learning curve, sometimes we feel we should do it more, sometimes we can get more help. But in principle, I like the fact that we're still front and center taking care of the situation because we don't want to look like America's pawns. Because the problem with that is that it just allows China to tell the rest of ASEAN or the region, don't help the Philippines. They're just American pawns. So the visuals matters, but operationally, I'm sure there's certain details we are not privy to that may suggest that indeed the Americans may be more directly involved. If not, down the road, that could be the situation.
What have you heard about this intelligence sharing command center?
Gisomia.
Well, inside Camp aguinaldo. What exactly are they sharing?
Well, the
What
Japanese and
information?
Koreans have something similar to the Jisomnia, which is essentially it allows for us to have very sensitive, high-level cybersecurity cooperation, intelligence sharing. But what I found interesting with the announcement from the DND a while ago is that it would also be a basis to facilitate more advanced acquisitions from America. As you know, one of the things we didn't discuss today is the Typhoon missile system.
That's right.
6 months ago, we were even denying it was here. Then 5 months
And
ago,
now
we're
there's
saying it will not be here.
And now we're talking about
3 months
potentially
ago, we
buying
said we
it.
want it here. Now we're saying we want to buy it.
And now, well, yeah, well, there's
That's
other
like
questions
Donald
around
Trump
that.
level
Exactly.
of whirlwind. So with all of these big developments, including, so you're talking about will we escalate in that? I'm saying we might escalate on all levels, including on the Taiwan question. You were in Mavulis. You know, we have bases very close there. Imagine if we put missile systems very close to Taiwan, right? Those kinds, that will,
That's
you know,
going to escalate things.
that's
So-
going to
so
poke the
talking about
Chinese.
the escalating it
Yeah.
and invoking possibly the mutual defense treaty, I've always been wondering, because for us to get some real help on the ground, it has to go through Congress, the U.S. Congress, right? How about in the Philippines? If we get caught in the Taiwan problem, the conflict there, what would it require? What process would it require for us before we go to conflict or be involved in conflict?
Well, first of all, it's
Mutual
mutual defense, not mutual offense treaty, right? So I think sometimes we think, when you say mutual defense treaty activation, this is it, let's go war. No, actually, there's step by steps. If you read actually the text,
Kasi armed attack you have to qualify what an armed attack
but
is.
if you look at it in the MDT text itself, not forget about the guidelines and all, it's very clear that first of all, mag-uusap tayo. Opo yung mga generals natin, general
That's
nila,
right.
mag-consultation tayo. Now, inevitably, the Congress, others have to come in. But we know in the case of U.S., for instance, on issues of foreign policy, there's tremendous amount of deference to the president, especially if it's Trump and everyone is Republican with trifecta and everything that we predicted correctly the other week, right? So I think there will be significant leeway. And let's not forget, there's bipartisan consensus against China, which is good for us, if God forbid we reach there. But as I said, MDT doesn't mean all-out war agad. It just means you activate a
start the
set of
discussions.
procedures
Yeah.
that may end in a military response or not. And then, by the way, kasama din dyan, we can take it to the United Nations Security Council, right? So, so it's not the nuclear option, fine. It's just the beginning of the final resort sets of steps, right? So, for me, when you say invoking mutual defense treaty doesn't mean let's go to war, per se. There are many steps before that. Nevertheless, on the Taiwan question, I know I'm more or less isolated on this issue, but I love Taiwan and all of that fantastic food, great people, amazing people. I stayed there as a visiting scholar
lot of
back in the
chips.
day. Taiwan fellow, lots of it.
It's
But my
vital
point
in the
is,
semiconductor supply
hinay-hinay
chain.
lang tayo. One of the things that I'm worried under the Trump administration, I'm talking about the administration, not Trump himself. No one really knows what Trump will do himself. But in the administration is that it might make it more difficult for Philippines to hedge its bets. We literally had Elbridge Colby, one of the top guys in the Republican Party here, who said something like, half measures are dangerous. Meaning, hindi pwede pahapyaw-hapyaw. Medyo China ka, medyo US.
Right.
Sabi niya, you have to make decision na. So, baka kasama dyan is, medyo ma-pressure tayo na, Pilipinas, katabi niyo yung Taiwan, alay niyo kami, hindi pwede kanya-kanyang diskarte dito. So I really hope the BBM administration gets the most out from US on U.S. Philippine Sea, but make sure we don't get over-involved on the Taiwan issue. The
gotta
burden
be
should be
careful.
more on Japan and US who are more capable. Because we're so behind the curve, we're still catching up. Imagine kung ma-stretch tayo on Taiwan, West Philippine Sea, ang dami pa natin bagyo sa Catanduanes, you know, like...
And now we want to buy Typhoon
exactly.
missiles.
So
That
don't
might be used as a
overcompensate.
leverage
Yun nga,
against us to get something from
exactly.
us.
You know, and don't give China excuse or others. And you know, at the end of the day, if God forbid something crazy happens, we have 250,000 Filipinos to evacuate there. And China may have a say if you can safely get those people across. Now, I'm not saying let's appease China. I'm not saying let's throw Taiwan under the bus. I'm just saying don't overpromise when you still have to get your house in order. We are still dealing with the Ayungin issue and you want to be 100. So what I'm saying, when it comes to Taiwan, maybe just mathematically, 60% US, 30% Japan, 5% Australia, maybe Philippines 2% of the burden sharing, right? Practically because our bases are close to there, right? So what I'm saying, go for minimal involvement on Taiwan, but still helpful. Go for maximal assistance on the West Philippine Sea.
Here's
Play
hoping
that
they
game.
see the math that way
Right.
too.
But
Or they
unfortunately,
hear that
I'm not
out.
going to be the negotiator with Donald
And
Trump.
we do know Trump is transactional.
Yeah.
Quite transactional.
But
Sorry.
not granular. So I don't know. I don't know.
He's gonna leave
He will
it
figure out.
to his team.
Yeah.
Ayungin, let's come back to Ayungin. Obviously, we've had a string of officials try to respond to what Secretary Austin tweeted.
Right.
The U.S. Embassy here said, this task force, and I believe we have that graphic, enhances U.S. Philippine alliance coordination and interoperability by enabling U.S. forces to support armed forces of the Philippines' activities in the South China Sea. And then it goes on to say, this initiative aligns with multiple lines of cooperation. If we could just roll, there you go. Multiple lines of cooperation between U.S. and Philippine forces, including the Mutual Defense Board Security Engagement Board process and the Bantay Dagat framework, in addition to our long-standing shared efforts to address regional challenges, foster stability, and promote a free and open Indo-Pacific. It's a lot of high-level diplomatic speak.
Right.
Translate it for
We
us.
simplify.
What does that mean?
In short, this is just a natural flow of where this alliance is going, right? I would love to see Donald Trump giving a shorthand version of
But
that.
the word interoperability there stood out to me.
That
Again,
means if there's a
does that mean
contingency,
practical
we are
terms
well
now?
coordinated, we can work together. Lock
because
in.
for a long time we were just talking about information sharing between the two militaries, and as Riza pointed out, the armed forces here has repeatedly begged off tangible American help, and now we're saying interoperability is what this task force is doing. Again, is that a sign?
I think we're reading too much into it. I think, we were supposed to do a lot of things with our alliances long time ago, and we didn't.
Okay.
Because, we're the only country to kick out the Americans. The Japanese and Koreans kept the Americans. The Australians even had them even more in Darwin. The Singaporeans welcome. We're the only ones who kicked the Americans out. So there was this huge period from 1990s to 2000s whereby we really didn't work on these issues, maritime security. So it's either global war on terror and counterterrorism, or still getting back to where we started. Now I think finally the foundations of the alliance are congealing and crystallizing. And if there's one good news is that we see a continuity from Trump 1 to Biden and potentially to Trump 2.0. So I think this is the continuity we can rely on and we have to push for. And the fact that you have people like Marco Rubio, who are good friends of the Philippines. Maybe you want to ask Senator Trillanes. It's like he met him a lot of time back in the day. So there are a lot of points whereby I think we can be hopeful about a sort of continuity.
As far as the defense.
Yeah. Now, in
and
spite of having
commitments.
colorful people like, and I've, President Marcos Jr. is, I think, the perfect person to deal with President Trump. They're just going to talk about Ma'am Imelda Marcos and their
The
great
Trump
days
Tower.
in Manhattan. Oh, well, they deny that. Their great days in Manhattan.
Their
and all.
Supreme Court ruling.
Yeah, so I think they can just keep it there and let the professionals handle the operational side. At the end of the day, let me just say this. I'm still cautiously optimistic about everything that is happening because finally we're figuring out what we want, what we can do, and where we want to go. And the reality is that we didn't have that before. Ang gulo natin.
Right.
Diba? Kay Aquino dito, kay Duterte dito, kay
It's always
Arroyo.
been like gray.
Now it's one direction.
Ngayon, medyo klaro na. So, and we have to make it clear to the rest of ASEAN, this is not a BBM thing. This is a Philippine national interest. This is our consensus nowadays, with a few fringes here and there outside it. But 90% of Filipinos support where we're going, if you look at the surveys and what they say. So, I think we're on the right path. We just have to make sure na steady lang yung direction of the wind and that we adjust accordingly and we play those granular game that I don't think Trump will appreciate.
6 days ago, it was reported that the Ayungin resupply mission went without incident. Where do you think China is now? It was quite surprising that
No, diba? After the
It was very peaceful.
June-July incident, we had a number of safe because remember, di ba meron tayong parang notification mechanism?
Right.
Na
That
medyo
we
may
give advice
mystification.
now.
Yeah. Sabi ng China, they're getting our permission. Sabi ng Philippines, no, we're just notifying.
Yes.
Hey,
We
dito
advise
kami
them.
pero wala kayong pake. Di ba parang ganun. So actually that worked Kaya ang ginagawa ng China, sa ibang area na tayo pinipressure, like Sabina Shoal, like Scarborough Shoal. So I think China is realizing that medyo mainit masyado yung Ayungin Shoal.
yeah.
And US is
hindi
there.
may task force Sabina.
Maybe there is, you don't know.
In the next
Yeah,
coming
no,
days,
Sabina,
no.
we don't have a military presence there.
Yeah.
Kung sana we did that in Scarborough. Ngayon mo makita yung hindi natin nagawa. If in the 1990s, we did the same thing in Second Thomas Shoal, di sana nag-ground din tayo ng isa pang old ship, naglagay tayo ng tao sa
Now it's
Scarborough
too
Shoal.
late.
Walang takas ng US kasi they're obliged to help us. So this means talaga, you have to take the strategic initiative. So the Ayungin Shoal, kudos to President Erap. If there's one thing he got right on foreign policy is to ground that rusted ship, because now at least we have something to defend.
By
So
the way,
kudos to Erap.
the decrease in presence in Chinese ships also due to bad weather. I spoke to Commodore J.
Right,
Tanyeli about
right.
it. Don't forget, there has
The
been
mini
a string,
typhoons.
Oh,
string
it
of
is December.
cyclones. That's
November,
right.
December.
He pointed to bad weather as well.
And maybe in 30 years with climate change, our problems will be solved. Everything will be under the water.
But now
That's
that
very
there's no
possible.
more typhoons, the number of Chinese vessels could
Maybe
increase
that solves
again.
all our problems.
But
yeah.
also,
That would work to our favor.
the G-Somiya has clearly angered Beijing. They have said as much. They've even threatened to pursue, what was the term? Necessary measures to
Yeah.
retaliate. What do we make of that? Isn't that just serving to poke the bear once
Well,
again?
there's always going to be diplomatic rants and all. That means it's something important. But remember, the other thing we said is this will be also our model with other like-minded powers and countries. So South Korea, Japan, Australia, France, Germany, England. So this is the beginning of a new chapter. So China is realizing this is no longer a 1-2 punch with the Philippines. It's the Philippines networking right and left. So we have a very hyper drive mode of diplomacy, defense diplomacy, which is not just U.S. I mean, Kudus, one thing I think we are getting right nowadays is that it's not all about the United States anymore. The U.S. element is very important, 40% of the picture, but 60% of the picture is everyone else who's getting active on this. You know, I've been going around from Germany to New Zealand to Tokyo. I'll be in India soon. You know, so everyone is interested to build relationship with us because they see us as a kind of a pivot state in this part. Not frontline, that's Taiwan, unfortunately, but we're a pivot state. So just keep on building on that. And I hope even when Trump comes in, we emphasize we're a key ally, but we also have our own mind,
Right.
our own strategic autonomy to protect.
What do you see on the economic front? We do know, like today it was reported that it's 59 peso to a dollar. The dollar is very strong. As an initial reaction to the to President-elect Trump, but some analysts say that the honeymoon phase might be over once Trump gets in position and puts all of the tariffs on Chinese goods. I mean, what do you see happening on that front? Is it going to be an economic war? How are we going to be affected?
Yeah, the people we have to watch are people like Lighthizer, the former trade representative of Reagan and Trump 1.0. They have been saying things that should really make you worried, that this could be 60% on them and 20% in Japan and everyone else and that. The reality is that there will be no free trade agreement, whatever, with U.S. most likely under Trump, right? The Indo-Pacific Economic Framework that Biden negotiated out. He also nixed the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. So if you're expecting some new big free trade deal, you have to worry. If you're Vietnam and some of the countries have huge trade surplus, you have to worry, right? I think it's only Singapore in this region who doesn't have huge, in fact, they even have deficit with the U.S. So all of us should be worried to a certain degree, but I think Philippines is at the lower ladder in terms of, lower rung of the ladder in terms of trade. So my suggestion, and I hope folks will at least listen to me on this issue, is then push for strategic investment from a national security standpoint. We have the second largest nickel reserves in the world. It's one of the few nickel reserves in the world that is not dominated by Chinese companies. You go to Indonesia, you go to Chile, you go to Sub-Saharan Africa, from nickel and cobalt, everything are Chinese company. Electric cars, everything is Chinese companies. So we should offer ourselves as a safe haven, China-free investment destination, and hopefully if we're going to get involved in Taiwan, also get more investments on semiconductors. I come from Baguio. We do Texas Instrument forever. We can do more sophisticated packaging design, in fact, production of semiconductors. So yun ang pwede natin gawin in the name of national security.